All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Greg, today we are joined by a former podcast guest before, retired Colonel Bill Edwards. Bill, thanks so much for coming on the show and the first show recorded in the new year. So happy New Year to you and everyone listening.
Yeah,
So,
happy New Year, guys, and we're hitting the New Year running. We're gonna
yeah,
hit the New Year running.
that's same thing here. So we've had you on before, obviously, to talk about your book, but what we didn't get into on that podcast, which I wanted to have you back on, is kind of what you do now. You've been in the private sector for a while, doing a lot of security work in a lot of different areas. Everything from security design for construction purposes to now a lot of what you do is commercial drone use, and you're sort of the subject matter expert in this area because you've been doing a ton of research on it and it's in the field of your work. So I wanted to have you on to talk about that because there's so much more obviously use of drone use commercially and privately that we see today, and then including now even another article I think you shared on LinkedIn not long ago about Amazon now testing out in a couple cities the delivery of drone stuff, which will drive me insane because my wife has, like, I feel like an Amazon package showing up here every single day. So if I have a drone
Well,
all of a sudden come into my yard, I'm I'm gonna freak out a little bit.
get
But
get ready for deliveries in your backyard. That's
yeah,
what they're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So we've got that, but also going on at the same time recently with the war in Ukraine and the just extensive use of drones in that conflict and how it's rapidly evolving, rapidly changing, and that's going to sort of affect the use even here at home, commercial use, security use. Anyone can hop on, like we were talking about, anyone can hop on YouTube, check out how someone's using it, and go, oh, I can do something pretty bad with this drone technology. So I kind of want to start with you to kind of give a little bit of background or talk about, what you are doing or what your area of expertise sort of is with drone use and on the commercial side. And I think we can kind of jump into it from there, if that makes sense.
No, it sounds great. Yeah. So I'll just do a little history. Back in 2017, when I retired from the Army, I was really interested in the evolution of commercial drone platforms. As a ground commander in Iraq in 2010, 2011, um, I was actually starting to get a little worried about what was actually maybe or possibly being used against us from a commercial perspective, because it was an interesting time of transition. And the first um, commercial drone actually came to market. I always talk about that. It did come out in 2010. It was with a French company called Parrot, and they went to market with a commercial drone where you could actually go and buy it and use it really for recreational use or whatever the intent is. At that point for recreational use, it was more about having fun with the platforms. And since that time, and if you think about it, we're in 2023 now, so roughly 13 years. If you look at the evolution of this technology from that point until now, it's incredible. I equate it to what we've seen in the cyberspace as well. So when we realized that cyber security was a necessity, and then we watched it promulgate its way through time over the last decade, we've seen how fast it's moved, and commercial drones are moving equally as fast from a capability, functionality, TTP techniques, tactics, and procedures. All of that is just moving so fast that I think frankly in the private sector security space, we're asleep at the wheel is where we're at.
And that kind of that's I appreciate the background on that, and then I like the sort of the analogy, the parallel with cybersecurity. So how all of a sudden there were started to be data breaches, then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this is a massive threat that we have to potentially deal with and ongoing and continue to deal with. That I see what you're getting at with the drone use. So, I guess to start, like, how are drones, or any unmanned system being used right now in private sector? I mean, because there's obviously I can just go on YouTube and see what's going on in Ukraine with it, but what's going on, here with commercial use in the U.S.?
Yeah. Yeah, so the commercial market's moving really fast as well. I mean, the experimentation with these platforms has been ongoing for a decade,
Hmm.
and we are seeing all different types of uses. We're seeing uses in medical delivery. We're seeing uses in commercial delivery. We're seeing uses in agriculture. We're seeing
Mhm.
uses in inspection. I mean, this technology, which is really what drives my interest towards it, is you're only limited by your creativity and imagination on how you can actually use this technology for a specific use case. Recently, I think I put out on one of the social sites that Amazon has gone public and said, you know, we're delivering via drone in a, you know, and it's constrained by a specific radius from the actual point of launch location. There are some, you know, things that are happening around that. But what's concerning is that instead of having a team approach to legislating how this technology should operate in society, we're seeing these one-offs, these companies going to the FAA or other authorities and getting the approval to do things, whereas we don't really have a holistic solution on unmanned traffic management, which is called UTM. I think in the future, what we're going to see is unmanned aerial mobility, which is think in terms of a pilotless taxi, things of that nature. I mean, we're headed in that direction very quickly. So in the commercial space, you know, you have all the positives of the technology that are driving deliveries or driving services, right? And then you have companies that have drone detection and monitoring capabilities that they sell to the market. Then you have companies that are out there and they're selling drone as a security service, where drones are used in a security, like a patrolling
Mhm.
platform. And then, of course, where we're really lacking is in the counter UAS capability, specifically in private sector airspace. Now, let's not look at that from a conflict zone or a war zone perspective, because all all capabilities are capable of actually operating in those environments.
Right.
But in private sector, we have a very complicated airspace. And so really doing the work from a public-private partnership, I think needs to take shape so that the technology can assimilate into society where it's successful and it's beneficial. Whereas right now we don't have, in my, you know, and I think it's probably in the security space, public knowledge, a counter UAS solution that actually can be utilized at a private sector event.
And so, you know, with kind of everything that you talked about, it seems like a big issue with all of this right now too is C2, command and control, and legal requirements, and administrative, and you know, all of the stuff like you just said. If I have a company, I can go out and get approval to fly something, but that from the FAA, but that what does that mean in terms of local policy, or what I can and can't do, privacy issues, there's an ethical issue, like like you just said, the big issue is there is no system in place, really, there is no process. And with that those are the things that scare me, because then there's so many seams and gaps in there for someone to exploit for bad purposes. So you have the obvious issue with some of the stuff where, okay, I order a package from Amazon, it gets delivered to my yard, but then it crashes and hits my kid or something like that. You know, those safety issues are obvious, and they're concerning, but the lack of sort of this command and control over everything, and the lack of oversight creates the opportunities for people that want to take advantage of that. And I don't know, Greg, I know you're not in along, and I want to throw to you before we go any farther
No, no.
to see if there's anything to
What
add.
I like your perspective, Brian, because you're saying accidentally and incidentally there are a whole bunch of things that haven't been addressed yet. We're rolling out the technology. I
Yeah.
would say let's take a giant evolutionary step back, because we've got Bill on the call, and I will tell you the two recent comments, and one so fresh it's still got the paint drying on it. Comments that Bill has made, the two in print that I like most now, because you're a very prolific writer and I like reading your stuff. is one, as security professionals, we must stay vigilant with emerging technology and proactive in our approach to overall program development. Love that. That synopsized exactly Brian's fear. I think that the second part of that, and it's from a different publication, Ukraine conflict has only made things worse by accelerating hostile capability in the conflict zone. But I would add the one that you said very recently, meaning this morning, this conflict has pushed this technology light years. So I would say, think back to when we all got our feet wet in Iraq. I distinctly remember going after terrorists and insurgents that were using UXO for IEDs and probably a tripwire technology. I remember leaving Iraq and thinking, oh my gosh, they're using garage door openers and motion lights and different servos and things that I had never seen before. And so I had to spin up on that. I remember getting to Afghanistan and saying, okay, well, at least they're a little behind the curve, but they're learning. They haven't had a VBIT or a vehicle-borne sniper platform yet. And all the people I was operating with on the Afghan side didn't even have a radio. They had a radio per group, and the radios were the outmoded, basically Russian technology. I remember coming back to Afghanistan a few months later, and everybody I was operating with had a Roshan. Everybody had an AK with a folding stock and some cool aim point style sight on it. The problem I see, what keeps me up at night, is it's going so fast, and because there's no controls, there's nobody to say, hey, we need you to stop at the next station and check on compliance. We need you to stop at the next station, pull over and tell us what your intent is. So I think my question parallel what Brian is talking about, that unregulated, and now I sound all of a sudden like a socialist, but unregulated conduct in this realm can only prove to be dangerous and hazardous. Bill, would you agree with me? Am I close on that one?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. So look, let's talk about what has happened, right? So the federal government is not, I mean, I don't think we're sitting on our hands, right? Back a year and a half, 2 years ago, the FAA came out with a regulation or a directive saying that all drones starting in September of 23 will have a digital license plate. Okay, that was like one of the first steps we saw in this evolution to UTM, really, is what we're talking. I think what they're doing is the building block to unmanned traffic management, right? So when you think of airspace management, the FAA really monitors and controls everything above 400 feet, yep, right? But everything below 400 feet, it's game on, right? So and that's where these commercial drones normally fly. And remember, what we're focusing on this talk is not a military grade drone platform. Right. We're talking about those platforms we can simply go on a website and buy with one click in our credit card. And so, that's the type of technology that will exist in this ecosystem of 400 and below, probably around 200 to 400 feet, what I call the drone superhighway, which is what we're seeing sort of evolve. We're going to someday we'll be walking down the street and there'll just be, these platforms moving over our heads and delivering goods and services and with a lot of positive aspects. So going back to what the federal government has been doing, we start with the FAA. Well, then the current administration came out with the National Action Plan that's centered around drones. And then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce countered the National Action Plan with a formal letter that said, here's, where we're at. But really what my biggest concern is I'm not a futurist, I'm just thinking through this from a security lens, is that, where the public gathers is where we're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so what we have to do is we have to really get those authorities worked out through a public-private partnership, that gives those business owners and those authorities that host large public gatherings, football games, parades, concerts, gives them the capability to execute a counter UAS plan if they think it's necessary, right? And this is all about really setting your concentric circles around your event, setting those I think I call them indications and warnings. And if a drone is entering a specific part of your airspace, like the infield of a baseball game, there should be some ability for that business to take some action so that it not only protects the game itself, the players, but the public, right? The public.
Right.
And there are technologies available that do that. What you'll see in conflict zones, there's a kinetic option, which is always, you're trying to shoot it out of the sky. There's a jamming option, which you're trying to take the signal away. But now there is a take control option, which I think is probably the best solution for private sector. If the private sector is properly trained and certified on how to do that, then we are mitigating our risk at these events. Remember, as a security professional in the last 6 years after retiring from the Army, I always tell my clients, we're never going to mitigate risk to 100%,
Right.
but we're going to mitigate it to a level that you're comfortable with or you can manage. And that's what we have to do with this. We have to take this technology seriously when it comes to those types of scenarios.
And so that's so there's a lot to unpack actually in there in your example,
Yep.
especially like a Major League Baseball game or some event in a city, outdoor concert, anything like that. On what they can and can't do, which obviously this goes back into, which is finally starting to sort of take hold more and more, but people realizing like, look, security isn't just something, oh, we hired a security company to protect our building or something. You can't, that's long gone. Like you have to integrate it into everything that you do, from an operational standpoint, and get everyone on board. I'd rather have 100 people in my organization just being, a little bit more understanding or aware of what needs to happen for security than hiring 10 people that work an 8-hour shift or something, right?
That's why I talk about security as a program, and Greg
Right.
mentioned it earlier in the podcast.
Yep.
But security programs are holistic, they're comprehensive, they're layered, right?
Yeah.
That's a security program. A lot of businesses, and it's no fault to people that actually are in these positions and they're trying to make decisions because they're hard decisions. But a lot of people default to a technology as the
Yes.
security program. So we're going to put a camera in,
Yep.
and that's our security. Well, that's fine, but it's only a portion of your security program. Your program starts with a threat assessment. Every security program should start foundationally with a threat assessment. The threat assessment informs you on what your capital investment is from a technology purchasing perspective. So if you're going to put in a video surveillance system, intrusion detection, access control, trusted access management, you're going to need to get that validation from your threat and vulnerability risk assessment. Then after you get your threat assessment done, your technology program set, then you start to think about operations, training, exercising, rehearsals, all the things that go into 100% comprehensive security program. One of the things that is clearly lacking in today's security programs is the attention to drones as a threat now, to the security ecosystem, to the security and safety ecosystem. So that's what I've been sort of trying to talk to people about is, if you don't have drones in your program, you should start thinking about it, right? You should start thinking about how would you react from an operational perspective if a drone breaks your indications and warnings line of your inner geofence, which is really the area you want to protect. What do you do? What does your staff do? How do you function? How do you collaborate with local law enforcement and possibly federal law enforcement, or however that, and emergency and hazmat and all the other things, medical, et cetera. So all of that is a security program in about 2 minutes of describing it. It's not a threat and vulnerability risk assessment and we're moving on. It's not buying technology and we're moving on. It's about this system that is constantly evolving, and it needs to be checked over and over again, so that it stays fresh. Combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, you would see Army, Marine, any unit downrange, they were constantly refining their security position, their platform, their posture, because it's always changing.
And they're always updating, and they were always collaborating. And current U.S. policy doesn't address how to protect large public gatherings in the private sector, because it's just not a moneymaker for them. And the majority of, if not all, large public gatherings are provided by private organizations. That's major sporting events like Brian alluded to, the concerts, festivals, and those are our most vulnerable venues. So when we do a risk assessment, just like you do, we pay attention to those things. And you know what? It's not unprecedented in print, in film. You guys aren't old enough. You know, I'm a film buff and a historian. Black Sunday, 1977, John Frankenheimer film. They wrote it around the Munich massacre, but the real idea was co-opting the Goodyear blimp that flies over NFL games, putting enough projectile darts and an explosive package in it, and flying it into the stadium. And when you think of that, back then, everybody was like, "Oh yeah, Black Sunday. It's a little far-fetched." No, it's not. It's not only within the realm of the possible, but it's at your fingertips. If you go to the local Walmart, you can buy one, and nobody's checking your ID. Now, part two of that, Bill, you brought up a great point that I think some of our viewers and listeners might not fully appreciate, and that's you can't just shoot a drone out of the sky or shoot a robot. That in a war zone, when you have these vast fields of rubble and people have defensive and protective equipment, maybe, okay, but you still have to watch that because projectiles and bullets go some places. The other thing is there's a person out there going, just shut it down. I've heard people say, hey, just shut down that vehicle during a police pursuit. That's all you need to do, is have the ability to remotely shut it down. Well, now you have a 200 yard stopping distance with a 100-mile projectile that's now going, wherever God, inertia, and physics and gravity are taking it, right? The idea here is, I love your idea about taking it over, because even in those vehicles, you can imagine a state patrol or somebody having the ability to override based on the last six of a VIN or whatever else that policy would be, and being able to take command of that vehicle and bring it down safely. Because if you shoot it out of the sky, and if it's armed, it's going to land somewhere, and either the shrapnel's going to kill you, or perhaps the explosive package. And we haven't even talked about CBRN. We haven't even talked about nuclear, biological, or chemical attacks. So we're getting there, folks. And if you don't think that we've already got 1 foot into this, then you really need to rewind and read some of the stuff that Bill has been putting out over.
Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
It's great. No, great point, because it's really what we want to do with this podcast, and with just the articles that we put effort into to write and publish, is awareness, and then grassroots movement to actually say, hey, look, we want to do something about this. We want to think about it consciously. What you're describing, Greg, is collateral damage, right? I mean, right. Collateral damage, we're never going to be in a position where we use kinetic or jamming in the private sector, unless, of course, we're under the umbrella of Homeland Security and the SEER events, the special events ratings. They have SEER 1 through 5. And in those events, there is federal law enforcement and other agencies that have authorities. Remember, it goes back to authority to do something, to actually take action. And what that action is, it's dependent on the call on the ground there. But the point is that in the private sector, which you highlight, our primary events where people gather are not SEER events.
Right.
A SEER event might be, as an example, a Super Bowl.
Right.
Okay. Yep. But it's not going to be the Eagles concert, that's happening on just any given day. So the point is how are we protecting our private sector when they're going to have fun, right? When they're going to these entertainment events, and they're expecting to have a good time and to enjoy the event. Our job in the security world is to set that bubble around that event, and then mitigate the risk as best we can.
And so what are there's, like, I see a bunch of potential issues or hazards or roadblocks into something like this, right? So let's use a major sporting event, just like a normal game, baseball game, football game, not the Super Bowl, not the World Series, just there's how many baseball games every year? I mean,
161
per team. So, you know what I mean? Like, so you get a lot going on, but The idea is there's what are the legal, moral, and ethical dilemmas or considerations that I have to take into account, right? If I'm a baseball team and I've got the game going on, and I have my security stuff in place, I hire folks like you to come in, and we get great technology, and we have to spend a lot of money, and just like it's always the seams and gaps where the enemies like to hide, the terrorist insurgents, whatever, the criminals like to hide in those seams and gaps. So now you're telling me I've got a drone, like, what is it? You talk about a major seam or gap in my security. I mean, you can go anywhere, you can see anything. It's like, yeah, one, how do you plan for it? But you're talking about countering something like that with either taking it over or shooting out of the sky, but whatever the mechanism is to do that. What are the legal, moral, and ethical considerations here? I mean, and someone operating a drone. What if it is a kid who really likes that baseball team? They're a diehard fan, and they live a couple blocks away and want to fly their drone over. I mean, there's all of these we have to take into account. What's the most likely situation, which I'm assuming it would be something like that, which is still a huge potential safety risk to everyone at the stadium versus someone coming to do a deliberate attack, right? A deliberate attack's going to be different, and it's less likely than it is the kid flying the drone over wants to get some cool YouTube videos. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what are those things that we have to take
We
into account?
So at this point, we don't know. We don't know if the drone is nefarious or not. That's the problem.
Right.
That's one of the problems. Um, Back in 2020, I wrote a piece for InfraGard, which you may be familiar with.
Yep.
But it was establishing this idea called the drone vulnerability risk assessment, which is the ground risk assessment. So similar to a TVRA, but from a drone perspective. And I lay out in there about 10 points on, and it was really just to put out to security professionals to say, hey, check this out. If you're struggling with how do you insert drones into your security program, start here, right? So I just put some ideas together, put it out there, and then I actually posited a piece on drone emergency response planning. So DVRA and drone emergency response planning were all in this one article through InfraGard. So that went out in 2020. So we're 3 years from now, 3 years ago, and basically that's the foundation. So then really the next step is I think there's probably, let me get this right, well, 3 legs to the stool. So you do your assessment of what do you think your actual drone threat is. Okay. I mean, and everyone's assessment's going to be different. Then the second piece is you want to test out a drone detection and monitoring technology on your facility. So you want to actually do some reconnaissance of your airspace in, like, let's say, a 30-day window. And then you can get some pattern analysis of actually what type of drones are flying over your property. And I will guarantee you will be surprised at how many drones are actually flying over your
Right.
property.
Yep.
And so, that's the second step. The third step is actually um, uh, developing your drone emergency response plan, and then how you're going to train the staff to react, and how you're going to collaborate and integrate with first responders, right? So you're really, again, it's another smaller version of a security program, but based around the drone technology. So drone vulnerability risk assessment, drone detection and monitoring, pattern of analysis. I guess you would call it a reconnaissance of your airspace, and then a drone emergency response plan that is inserted into your program. At that point, the fourth leg, and I'll call it, instead of a stool, a chair now, the chair is you need to tabletop exercise various scenarios centered around a drone in your airspace. Now, how do you do that? Well, what I would do is I would, if I was securing a public event, I would set some concentric circles around that event. And I would have an outer perimeter working all the way into an inner perimeter. That outer perimeter would be my first geofence. It would be my first indications and warnings line where a drone detection and monitoring capability sees a drone. So let's say a drone is flying towards the event, it crosses that line. We now have indications there's a drone in the airspace. Well, as you get closer to actually the main event, you have a line in there that you're not going to allow, or you don't want the drone to go through. That would be your inner geofence. And if you have that inner geofence set and a drone looks like it's moving into that space, then you would want a certified team of counter UAS professionals on your staff that could take control and land that drone safely. Now, you don't know if the drone has any payload on it, so you have to land it in an area that can be inspected for hazmat and ordnance. Now, if it's just like you said, Brian, some person that's really interested in the game and they want to get video, that's easy. The drone lands, the payload is inspected, then the drone can be returned to the owner or whatever they want to do at that point. But there's also ability now through drone detection and monitoring where you can geolocate the actual operator.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever the operator's
Right.
flying from, you can know those coordinates,
Mm-hmm.
and you could, one TTP or technique, tactic, or procedure would be you're going to launch a QRF or a quick reaction force or a law enforcement element to that location to have the drone brought back by the operator. If it's just a recreational use, that they want to see the Eagles playing live or something, right? I
Right.
like the Eagles.
Right.
So that to me describes, I think, what you were asking, but I'll
Yeah,
pause there
no,
because
it does, and what you gave is these are all the considerations, and so it's which is a lot. Like, you know what I mean? To really counter this or stay on top of it, what you just provided was, okay, now I need a team. Now I need to have this technology. Now they need to be trained in that technology. I have to develop my own standard operating procedures on how we're going to handle this. I probably have to do some coordination myself because there might not be a lot out there right now yet with my local police agency or whoever. So and this is why all of those things are why something like this scares me, right? So like cyber attacks, we know they're going to happen. There's protocols we can put in place. We can minimize stuff, but we have policies and procedures now. We can train our people. Hey, this is why you don't stick a thumb drive in the computer. You don't do this, or whatever the policy and procedure is. With this new area right now, like a lot of that hasn't been built yet. And when those things haven't been built yet, it's two things. One, if you're trying to counter this and trying to get ahead of it, it's actually good because you get to write the plan and you get to figure out what works best for you, and then you get to help implement that plan. So if you're trying to get ahead of it, it's actually more advantageous to do it the sooner the better. But then if I'm want to do some harm or I have some nefarious intent, man, I know this is a great way just to tie up resources. I mean, just knowing all of this, like I can just go to one of these events and start flying a drone around just to tie up all your security resources, and that might not actually be the issue. And I don't want to go give too many ideas, but there's plenty out there. But that's the whole thing. I have this another layer, and what else needs to be done from a policy level, and like how does airspace work, and then can I own the airspace above my house and then lease it to Amazon or something? You know what I mean? Like
well,
what do we do?
it all goes back to authorities and how those
Right.
authorities come from the federal government down to the state, local um, um, areas of government, and then how does it get to see what we're trying to do, which I think is good, is we're covering federal and SLTT, right? I mean, we're talking about those things openly, but we're not really talking about those private sector businesses that own these events. I
Right.
mean, and so I mean, you might have support from a state or local agency, but at the end of the day, who's liable? Right? Who's liable at these events? Well, the owners are the owners of these that host these events, and I'm sure they're starting to think about this issue as well, because we're starting to get a lot of conversation around the topic, but it's taken a long time. I told you I started talking about this in
Mm-hmm.
2017, and now we're starting to build some great momentum. And it's not, I mean, I'm not an expert in anything. I think that this is just me looking at the problem and then trying to get conversation started. I always end my posts in social media, LinkedIn specifically, well, let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep talking about it. Let's get some movement around this. But the fact is that those events at that level of private sector ownership have no recourse at this point. They can do nothing but react, in my opinion.
I think we need to address both ends of this spectrum, and I think you guys really opened a can of worms here, which I'm more than willing to root around in. First of all, next month is Mike Syracuse's birthday, our dear friend from Hampton Roads. We used to have some incredible conversations about this very topic with Mike. Mike is a Wile E. Coyote super genius.
Brilliant guy.
But I want you to think in terms of something here. You're talking about private sector who's going to immediately default and blame the Fed if there's any kind of loss of life or any kind of major catastrophic damage. We know that. They're going to say, hey, you didn't regulate us. You didn't say no. You didn't anticipate. And then the other part of that is that we've had Cessnas land on the White House lawn. So somebody's going to say, hey, it's not unprecedented. Let's just mirror what we do, because we have black helicopters that have no rating that nobody knows about. We have police helicopters that have certain airspace. We have regular commercial vendor. Somebody's going to oversimplify it that way. So there's two, and I'll give you the third one. We, since 2016, have broken a new mold when Dallas police decided to use a drone to kill a shooter. There's 5 coppers on the ground dead, 9 other officers injured, 2 in the stands that are injured, and the police chief makes the astounding order to say, what can we send in? And they go, well, we got one of them robots that does, bomb detection. He goes, well, can we put a bomb on it? They work together, they collaborate, and it kills, what was his name? Micah Johnson. Micah Johnson was the shooter there, a former military guy. Why am I bringing that up? Because now you've got much more detailed technology that can deliver that package precisely anywhere. We're talking a civilian environment now. We're talking police that are completely mandated. We're not talking Title 10. We're not talking, full combat. We're talking, if Brian, if you remember, I sent you a quote that one time right after 2016, where they asked a law professor, because it was unprecedented, and we actually talked about that to folks and said, listen, this is how things happen. Something will happen, and then we have to write the laws to the fidelity, the granularity to fix it. And the law professor said it was shocking, it was stunning, but it was also very innovative. So I guess in the end, it was impressive. I love that comment, because what he was saying is, listen, nobody wants a hurry to kill somebody. But in this instance, there was a tremendous loss of life. They had negotiated for hours. There was no way that guy was coming out. So they sent something in for him. How you regulate that? Precedent again, San Francisco, just before, what was it, Thanksgiving? That said, okay, we allow robotic escalation of lethal force, and robots include UAVs in my brain, and certainly in the brain of many of our listeners. But then all of a sudden, almost immediately by December, they came back and the council said, we're never going to use a drone to kill a human. These are the big problems that are facing us right now. And Bill, I'm so glad you're on the call, Colonel, because if you wouldn't be talking about it, who else is talking about it? We've got to rattle some doors. We've got to shake some people up and tell them these are the issues we need to address now, because it's coming.
Yeah, and I think what's important to highlight is that the security professionals that will run these businesses and work these events, and they're doing their best they can to mitigate risk and to keep it at a safe event. I think they're frustrated too, because they don't. A lot of them, I talk to a lot of them. They don't understand the technology. They don't understand the capabilities. They don't really have time to learn about it, and so, but it's one of those, it's a forcing function now. It's when we talked about cyber before as an example in a similar vein, the drone technology has, and now we can get into a little bit of what Ukraine has shown us, because in my opinion, I've put a couple pieces out on this. Giant laboratory, biggest experiment we've seen in the convergence of commercial and military platforms in one conflict. So there is, I was having a discussion this weekend on this topic, that is drone technology a revolution in military affairs, which is a term that's used when a technology actually changes warfare. So I would say by itself, no. It's an evolutionary technology. But when you talk about converging these platforms with military design platforms in a conflict, then we're starting to talk about an RMA, because it's a tactic. And a tactic can be an RMA. When you talk about things like military revolutions, which is a totally different definition, and I'm going a little bit off here, but that's when a technology changes society. So that, and what we're seeing right now is how, and I say it all the time, it's sneaking up on us, but it's there. But commercial drone platforms are in essence changing society.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's happening. I mean, we're not, we all haven't experienced the delivery yet, but let's
Right.
say 5 years from now, guarantee we all will experience the delivery in some form or fashion if you're ordering from one of these businesses.
But
So
if you
that's
had somebody as smart as you that came on a thing as cool as a podcast, which we didn't have 25 years ago or 35 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And somebody said, hey, listen, next big thing is right around the corner, and it can bring with it some amazing benefits and some incredible dangers. Wouldn't you listen? And that's what surprises me, because you're out there knocking on doors. You're going door to door to tell people, hey, open up your eyes. And you get, listen, I've learned one thing about LinkedIn. LinkedIn isn't about reading what you post, it's being in a hurry to post something back. You get what I'm saying? Oh, yeah, I had that in 2017. Yeah, kiss my ass. The idea is that I would think somebody says, which I try to do to you, thanks for opening my eyes to an aspect, a facet of this that I didn't know about or didn't think about or didn't realize. That's what I think that we need to do, is open up that this is much broader than we are making it right now. This is not just a cool video. This is not just a unique thing. It's not the electronic garage door opener or the Ring doorbell. We're talking about something that's going to have ramifications, that's going to change the way humans live in the future.
Well, if you look at, there's companies in U.S. companies operating in Africa have been doing so for years now, where they're actually delivering medical supplies to
Right.
remote
Right.
locations.
Yeah.
That's a great positive use of
Yeah.
the technology. They're geolocating the drops. They're putting needed medical supplies right on
Yeah.
target, and they're doing a great job with it. Right? I mean, to me, that's something we should all be,
Uh,
uh,
I would
clapping our
add
hands.
search and rescue.
Yeah.
I would
Right.
add search and rescue, because we
Yeah.
can't do those things. We can't go into some of those forbidding environments. So totally with you on that.
Yeah.
And
But what I'm trying to focus here is that we've got to put tools in the hands of our private sector security professionals that allow them to continue to mitigate risk at public events. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not in the federal working groups. I'm not in, any of that those type of environments, but I am advocating that we think about not only federal is going to take care of itself. SLTT, which is the next level, right? State, local, tribal, territorial. That's the next level down.
Yep.
But are we addressing really where we all go? I mean, are we addressing that? And I'd say no. I'd say no, we're not.
Right.
no, and
Brian,
And that's
I would throw to you, Brian. Remember when we had these discussions about AEDs? AEDs revolutionized and changed the industry, and we need to put them in a larger number of places so that communities don't restrict them to the libraries and golf courses. They need to be at those events that they save a life. And throw bags for school shootings. Having a throw bag where a kid can pull out an emergency medical kit and it automatically activates a GPS so local people know where their casualties are. These are things that are low calorie investments that don't have to be a tremendous amount of money, that are game changers. And we know that. And we're not in a rush to do it on drones, and we're not in a rush to do that on computers, computer piracy or computer kidnapping. And I think it's ridiculous. What our priorities are all messed up.
so well, and the way I look at this, because like you said, this is sort of going to be revolutionizing things in a major way. We're sort of in that initial phase of it, right? We're still early on in that. And my thing is, when humans usually when we get some new technology, we tend to we got to figure out how to use it, right? And so
Right.
we kind of fall back on how we've used something similar or what we've done in the past, and we still have this, so it changes things, but not really yet at first, because we end up, and this is why I brought up the want to talk about what you see going on in Ukraine with the use of drones. They're still using it almost in the same way they use some other aerial platform or indirect fire platform. Just it's able to have major implications at a very low tactical level. So, which is good, for them, bad for the enemy. But if I look at it here in the U.S., well, sure, at a low level, someone doesn't need a whole lot, just be able to fly a drone. It can do a lot of harm. Yes, that's true. But the other side of that's true, meaning I don't need a lot to understand how to counter them. I don't need a lot to understand what someone's likely going to do with them, because there are only so many things I can do with a drone. Yes, it's easier to have access into areas that I would previously deny me physical access, but I only get so much access, right? It can only carry so much. It can only do so many things. And you know what? It does trace back to where I'm actually at. There's a signal going there. So someone with some technology can figure out exactly where I'm at when I'm flying this thing. And you know what? Someone might see it on another camera, can send someone over. Or there's a so what what I always try to do, it's like predict, what we do is, human behavior pattern recognition and analysis. What
Right.
do you predict what's going to happen? What can I account for? It's the same thing in a security assessment plan too. What are the likely things that are going to happen? Here's the extreme things that can happen. You need to have at least a plan for. It's probably not, but here's what's likely. And that's when it falls back to, that's what I get out of watching a lot of the videos from Ukraine. Is like, what does it start out with? They're sending like drones over to get cool combat footage, just like US troops did with when we got GoPros and stuff. I remember that shift from early on in Iraq to all of a sudden later, then everyone had a video camera, then to the point where now units wouldn't go out without one. Like you have to record everything. So that change didn't take that long because the technology gets so much faster. So I see that similarly now with the stuff in Ukraine where, okay, it's initially we're going to use this for surveillance and reconnaissance, right? Let's go check things. Okay, we have one big enough to carry a little payload. Okay, what do we want to do with it? Well, we have to keep it simple, right? We have to be very, very precise with it and keep it simple. We can't do something, we don't have the U.S. technology that we've been putting, drones with armed drones in battle space for 20 years now. Like I've just got this little thing that I have to figure out. So it still follows that set pattern, but what it does to the battlefield is it really lowers that impact to a very tactical level. Because when some of those videos, when they show go over and they drop like a grenade or a modified even a grenade, and it's like dropping into the turret of the Russian tank, regardless if that was a broke down tank that had been sitting on their side of the line for the last 2 months and there was no one, it doesn't matter. Like I see that and I'm a Russian soldier, I'm like, all right, you just freaked me out. Now I have to change my
Mhm.
tactics so much based on just watching that video. So it's a huge, huge impact, which is why it's important here in the US. So my big thing is, what am I supposed to learn from this? What are those takeaways from what's happening in Ukraine that I could think, giving your experience and Greg, your experience, I would say even you, Bill, is just your experience as a commander of U.S. forces in Iraq. Greg, your experience as a human behavior expert, what can I take away from watching these? What should I say? You know what?
Right.
That's something important. That little thing that you didn't notice right there, because I brought up one at the beginning where they showed the team come over and they were rearming the drone. And I
Right.
took one look at this video and went, how many times a day do these guys do this? Because they were so fast. It was the precision of a NASCAR pit crew where they do that tire change. So what are those little things out of there that I need to be concerned with, or I need to see as like, hey, that's something potentially I can learn from? And that's kind of an open question. I mean, that's a lot. So what, I would
Well,
throw
I'll
to
throw
you
two
guys.
more at you, Bill. I'll throw two more at you, and they're easily classified as a subject matter expert on the topic. I would say we're not talking about autonomous. That opens up an entirely new level
Right.
of complexity and danger. And we're not talking nano. Nano's coming. We know that nano is
Yeah.
on the horizon. Think of the level of complexity there. And the average, I'm thinking there's 15,000 police agencies in the United States. How many are prepared for the kid with a drone that just wants to disrupt the high school football team halftime show, not a terrorist act? So now Brian laid out a couple of very hard ones for you. There's a few more for you to consider.
Yeah, well, we'll go back to the point we made earlier, which is you don't know the intent of the drone. So
Right.
if you
Right.
don't know the intent, you have to assume that the intent is bad. I mean, that's if I was running a security operation, that's what I would do, and I would have my layered defense set up just like you would do in any type of military operation. You would have those indication and warning lines, right? Those triggers. And so when you talk about, and we probably won't have time today to get into autonomy and AI and the others, the platforms you buy or you can buy simply online are built with those capabilities already. This is
Hmm.
why I
Yes.
emphasize the fact that the technologies that are commercially available are very well advanced.
Yes.
I mean, they have the ability to sense other drones in their airspace.
Yep.
So when you talk about that technology, that's when you start getting into the conversation about the possibility of swarms, drone swarms.
Right.
And drone swarms, really, I don't think you should classify a drone in a swarm formation unless the command and control is centralized. So, you know, you could have a bunch of drones in the air, but if they're just drones being flown by individuals, I don't consider that a swarm. You know, a swarm would be a particular mission under a C2 umbrella that you know is set in motion to do something. We saw recently out at the National Training Center, which is where the military trains. It's out in the desert there. We saw
Fort
where
Irwin just drove
Yep.
past there
Fort
actually
Irwin,
not long
where
ago.
a drone swarm was actually put into play in the games to simulate an ISR, a intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission
Right.
of the enemy unit. So they were using multiple drone platforms to survey the force, right, to get an understanding of what the blue force or the good guys look like. So the point is that all of this stuff is capable. At the end of the day, all Ukraine has shown us, if we just want to summarize it quickly, is look at all the creativity and innovation that's happened in Ukraine that has then given
Yeah.
thought on how these platforms can be used. One of the things that really caught my eye recently was the use in Ukraine of what's called first person view. Now, first person view is when you know, an infantry soldier in the trench line can put on goggles and then literally drive a drone into a window, a door, a tank turret, an infantry fighting vehicle, back door, whatever. That's first person view. So you can see it. I've seen it multiple times in live video where a soldier in the trench in Ukraine flies a drone that's armed into a door and the drone detonates. So maybe the soldiers in that room were having lunch, taking a rest, whatever. But now you've just changed the tactical battlefield and significantly with capability. Now, again, shifting back to where my focus is, first person view in private sector, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you know, so how do we counter it? How do we defend against it? How do we protect our athletes, our musicians, our public? How do we do that? There's got to be some thought put into that. And that whole point of the podcast really is, what is that thought? Where are we going with it? And I'm not the first to do this. I mean, there's many people out there that are much smarter than me in drone technology and understand, you know, what's capable, but are we actually building the momentum to set ourselves up for mitigating risk? That's what it's all about.
I would throw two ideas out. All of your points are well taken and they're spot on. Again, you do yourself a disservice because you truly are an innovator in this, right? There are a lot of people in this genre, but none of them are trying to give it away for free and say just open up and pay attention and just writing superfluously on it so people are educated. Number one thing that Ring doorbell cameras are catching is cheaters. People forget they're there and they cheat and they're coming in and out. Why is that important? Because the number one video that I remember last week that scared the crap out of me with drones is where they got together and they were burning the wasps or the hornet's nest out of the tree with a drone with a flamethrower. Okay. You know what? There's a lot of people out there with nefarious intent, or at least don't have the same safeguards, Darwin Awards, that you and I may have. And what I'm afraid of is sometimes what we get is a catastrophic event. And that, well, like a school shooting, and I won't name any school shooting. After every school shooting, it's bump stock, extended magazine, stop this, we got to do that. And nothing is about, hey, going into the school and training the people on what to do before the incident, right? Here's one of those that all we take is one Las Vegas strip shooter during a concert. And guess what? It's going to spin it wildly out of control. We don't need that. This is an innovation that can save countless lives. It can save us a tremendous amount of money. think of the applications only in the Forest Service for forest fires.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we could go on, and again, there's no way we're going to get it through in one podcast. But the idea is that what happens is we default to combat. We default to, Brian, I remember the exact videos you're talking about, dropping the shuttlecock into the vehicle, or when the guy's taking a poop or something, right? And what we have to think, though, is how we react now is going to shape that future of all UAV antics.
Yeah, we're not setting the conditions at least fast enough.
Certainly haven't.
I mean, I think, like I said, we're there is action. I mean, we don't want to negate what has been done.
Yes,
but I don't think we're moving fast enough as it pertains to this. And I mean, the technologies are out there to set that risk mitigation drone vulnerability assessment in place. But it's not happening. One, probably because it's not built into budgets and people can't afford it. Maybe the technology is too expensive. There's a lack of training. There's got to be a training and certification, I think, at the national level that says you are certified to take control of a drone. And we have trained you, we have certified you. Like in the military, we all go through training and certification before we're allowed to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that needs to take place in this as well from a take control perspective. But I think what the point you're making, which is sad, is we can't wait for that bad. I say it in my articles all the time. We can't wait for the bad day to happen before we do something. And when cyber was an issue, we saw the public-private partnership come together very quickly and form solutions and started putting together. I think what we probably need is some legislative champion to help us move this along. Someone that sees it as a priority, gets it into the process so that we can actually start doing something. So
yeah. No, those are great points. I would say this. Because Brian and I don't specialize in security. We're experts in human behavior pattern recognition and analysis. But security is one of those realms that we operate in very often. And when we see a problem, we like to tell people about it, whether we've been asked the question or not. And I would tell you this, 90% of the stuff that's out there when it comes to personal and event security and hiring security personnel for like executive and dignitary type stuff. What we see is a person saying, train with your gun, ram the car, boot the door, do all those other things, which is okay. That's a necessary attribute, I'm certain, in some realm of personal security. But what you're doing is you're looking down and in through a straw. You're looking at your front sight post. You're not looking up and out. Then we get the other thing, and I don't want to bash any names or add any names, but you get the real visionaries in the field that they go, hey, listen, it's all about planning. And if you plan and you have your ISR and you have your information and even your public information sources that are available out there, you can mitigate so much of the danger. I think that's where we are here, because those folks there want to divide a line and say, hey, up armor, up armor. That's not the answer. The MRAP wasn't the answer to the ID solution, right? I mean, it's humans. If a human can invent it and a human can place it, then a human can outthink that person. So we could sit down with a panel of experts, and I completely agree with you, Bill, it's got to be at the federal level, and say, listen, here are some future problems, tabletop it. Here's some future problems that we could expect, just like the automotive industry, just like smoking, just like drinking, and say, if we put these safeguards into place now, it'll bear fruit in the long run. And guess what? We don't know what we don't know. So leave some open, like the U.S. Constitution. You know what I'm saying? Where as we learn with our skin knees, we can quickly adopt and change direction. But I know we're not doing that, but I hope that that's where we're all thinking of going, especially outside of this podcast.
And you got to think too, it's, I focus a lot on the aerial platform from a drone perspective. But when you look at the attack on the Russian fleet, it was done by a sea drone. I don't know what the exact term is, but it's a drone on the ocean or the water. It was done through aerial as well. But you also have robotics are entering society. we see all this stuff in the conflict zones because they're great ways to experiment and test how technologies will function. But we're seeing robotic medevac capability in Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's
That
a there's a medevac going out, and it's not manned. It's soldiers are going to put a wounded soldier on that, and then it's going to go back to the aid station. We're seeing that. We're seeing drones on the ocean, under the ocean. We're seeing drones under the ocean, and bodies of water, and then we're seeing the evolution of the aerial platform. Look, people will argue with me all day. I don't think drones have changed conflict. I don't want anyone to come on the
no,
podcast and say, "Oh, what is he talking about?" The drone is just another tool.
yes.
The drone is a tool in the conflict. But those, again, where I'm trying to emphasize here is we see these tools and they're being used, and we're seeing the creativity and innovation. How does that apply to us in private sector? Because anything that happens in a conflict zone eventually makes its way into society. And so, we've got to be cognizant of that, and that's sort of what I'm stomping my foot on. I do a presentation all the time, which is just an educational presentation called Killer Drones. The future is now, because the platforms are here.
Yeah.
All they're doing is getting more sophisticated. That's all they're doing.
It is, and then like you had mentioned, it's leading to some sort of autonomy with it as well, which it's already capable of. And like you talk with the different swarm stuff, I watched something on TV. I think it was on New Year's Eve. They had, I think it was out of Dallas or something, but they had their fireworks show. But then they also had this drone, the light show where they go, and it's absolutely beautiful and it's so cool. You know what I mean? Because they can just program the drones, launch them up, and they put on this whole show and take on different characters, and they go and with lights on it. And it's like, man, but like it's also just me. I'm like, that's terrifying, because there's so much you could do with that if you have some nefarious intent. And there's a lot, because there's also a push now with it just in the U.S. with there's more funding and grants and public partner private things for STEM technology, right? So there's all this STEM work with everything from VR, AR, and drone stuff. It's like, so, all right, if I'm that Major League Baseball team, I'm going to host a STEM camp and have a drone camp at my place. And I'm going to have them tell me everything. You know what I mean? Like, these are things that you can go, all right, well, we don't know anything in our organization. I guarantee there's some kids out there with some people behind them at a school training and learning. Well, that's who's going to tell you, because that's the future generation right there. Going to look at it like, no, get away, old man. Like, even to me, they're like, hey, old man, step aside. I'm like, hey, when did I become old man? But the idea is and they can show you what the capabilities and limitations are, and then you can wear your security hat or operations hat and go, oh, okay, I get it. I don't know how to fly that like you can, and I don't know the full understanding of it, but I know what the threat is to me. And that's all I need to know. I don't need to know how many feet per second and altitude change and what it can do. I need to understand how it affects me. And I like those little low calorie things where I've had folks before, oh, we just have the local camp come in and they're just having a good time and we're funding this great STEM project. But what we're getting out of that is a whole bunch of information that we had no idea about. And those things are kind of ways that like those low calorie ways I can learn more in how it affects me, if that makes sense.
And what I think I advocate for is just this. I'm really advocating for this take control capability, but when you look at a conflict zone, they're using every capability in a layered approach. They're using kinetic, they're using take control, they're using jamming, they're using different types of microwave types of systems, things that are already out in the public knowledge. But the point is that you can't do that in private sector. You can't do that in airspace where airplanes are flying, helicopters are flying, where there's public transiting in airspace. That's the dangers, right? That's why this whole idea of UTM is not only super complicated, and it's not an easy solution, but we need to get our minds around it and find out or figure out how to do it right properly. The regulation that's going into effect, I think in September of 23, for all drones to have the digital license plate is great. It's a great first effort, but it doesn't account for all the drones that are already in the airspace.
Right.
6,000 that are being pushed out into Ukraine, China being the biggest supplier of armed drones, tens of thousands that are already out there. You're exactly right. And the street modifications, look, we all know that once a person understands how to work the RF capability, next thing the other one's going, hey, how can I build one in my yard? You know what I'm saying? I'll make it bigger, I'll make it smaller, I'll hook it to a lawn chair, and I'll be flying that son of a gun. So yeah, I would suggest that everybody watch 1984 Runaway with Tom Selleck. You remember
Is
that
that with
one?
the balloon one where he shoot as?
It's the one with the little drone spiders, or the robots are following around, and the drones, and they have the smart bullets and stuff. But look, Philip K. Dick wasn't so far off on this, but we had to learn how to deal with cellular telephones. We had to learn how to deal with all of the advent of this new technology. This is nothing out of the ordinary. We're not talking about a space-time continuum. We're talking about something we can control if we jump on and we're early adopters of regulation.
Yeah, I agree. So,
Well,
I mean, great conversation.
Yeah, no, I guess I would end with the question is how can I own airspace so that I
above
can
my house and
so
rent
I
it.
can
That's
so
what
I
Marin
can
wants to do.
lease it to Amazon for and become a millionaire. I don't know.
Well, I think New York City has that already figured out. I know that the buildings in New York actually do own the airspace above their building. So I don't know how that's done. You could probably Google it. But
That's amazing.
I'm sure someone's already cornered the market on that one. So
but
well,
what
instead of adopt a highway program, it's going to be, I own this next
adopt a
piece of air,
skyway,
right?
yeah.
Adopt the skyway.
what I'm grateful to you guys is just to have the platform to talk about this.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the thoughtful questions and conversation because again, in my view, I just want to keep the conversation going. I want people to think about this in more depth. I want to see a really vibrant public-private partnership when it comes to the platforms on how we think about our private sector public gatherings. Where our children go to concerts, where our families go to see ball games or even to attend a parade or whatever it may be. So I think that's the most important thing. I'm going to keep writing about it. I'm going to keep pushing it out. In fact, I have an article coming out, or it's out now. It came out about 10 minutes ago on in SIA security organization, and we're I'm talking more about this topic and promulgating it again for more discussion. Again, I don't again for your audience and for anyone that sees this, I don't claim to be the expert. I'm just paying attention, and I'm trying to just bring awareness and from a security perspective, and again, I'm not really focused on the federal side. I'm not focused on conflict zones. I mean, we have plenty of big companies that are taking that on.
Right.
It's what are we doing in the private sector? What are we going to do to set our security professionals up for success so they can mitigate risk?
Now, and Colonel, you're a wildly intellectual person when it comes to a variety of topics, specifically laser focused on these. Brian and I are a couple of street kids. We have good intentions, and we want to get as much basic information out to everybody as possible so they can do their homework, so they can learn more. So this is a perfect forum for those type of discussions. I like it when it's highbrow. You're really tasking us to, turn on the brain juice and think about those. And if we can motivate one other person, look, you've got a list of intellectual friends. We know some of them, and they're really highbrow thinkers. If we can activate them and we can activate the grassroots support, this is surmountable. This is not something that's insurmountable.
That's what I agree. And I would say to anyone that's on that sees the podcast, you can go to my LinkedIn profile. Everything I've written about, I mean, literally, I write in 2 to 4 minute, 2 to 4 minute reads. So they're super digestible. You can digest them pretty quickly. But they're all posted on there. Everything's free. It's all just available to go through and think about. I know that if I was in a position where I was running security for a hospital or a stadium or a concert, I would want to know as much or have as much information in my toolkit that I could have so I could set the staff up to operate. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is operate from a safety and security perspective. So, the piece I would probably end on is anything you do in this world of security, you've got to train, rehearse, and exercise all the time. You've got to throw in these, once a month exercises, your, yearly exercises where you bring in all your law enforcement and your first responders and you collaborate. I tell, and this is an old saying, it's not invented by me, but you don't want to meet your first responder on the day of an event, right?
Yep.
And so, that's something that is built into that tail end of your
Right.
program. And the program is circular, right? So you also want to revisit your threat and vulnerability risk assessment probably, once a year or maybe every 6 months, because the threat environment changes. Drones are only the current technology. What's the next technology? We don't know yet,
Yep.
right? We don't know
Yep.
what it's going to be, but we do know that this technology, these platforms are I think a military revolution, are going to change society.
Right.
I completely agree. And, we appreciate you coming on and sharing all
Always.
this. And then to anyone listening, I'm going to put all the links to some of the articles that I use with the questions on there, and as well as your LinkedIn a link to your profile. That'll all be in the episode details, so you can click on there, learn more about Bill, take a look at what he read. Like you said, I love it too, what you post. It's like these quick 3-minute reads or something where it just, okay, damn, I didn't think of that. That's a great point. And that's perfect. Right? Those are the thinking points we need. And for those, a lot of folks who listen to this too are in that sort of operational to strategic level security
Yes.
mindset. And so them hearing this, I know they're going to go, oh, you know what, maybe I should either reach out to Bill or find out, add something, this is something I need to add. And it is. And there's always something to add. Like you said, we don't know what that next thing is. But we know where it's at right now with drone technology. We know where it's likely headed, and now is the time, because it's not complete adoption yet. We don't have it fully integrated yet, but it's going there. So the sooner you get on board with it, the sooner you put some protocols and procedures in place, the easier those problems, when they come up, you'll be able to mitigate them completely sometimes, or at least be account for them with whatever your policies and procedures are. And that's all I mean, really, that's all you can do. And that's
right.
it. There's no getting rid of the threat. There's just that's not a thing. So as long as it's something that I can count for and I can move out forward with it, and everyone can be confident about the decisions they make. So that's the point of it too. So on that, unless you guys have anything else to add, some final words.
I would say one quick thing. Remember, don't think this doesn't apply to you. If you're having a gender reveal party, if you're having a wedding, if you're having some sort of event like that, I would add a line right down at the bottom. If you've got like alcohol security, add drone. Those are the type of things that you got to think about.
Now someone's going to use. Now
someone's
going to use a drone for their gender reveal thing, and it's going to
I'm
start
thinking
another
of all those
forest
boobs
fire
that are out there
something.
blowing off their leg or starting off the explosion.
Starting a fire.
It's a natural progression. If you're going to consider it, you might as well consider this.
All right. Well,
yeah, and again, we got the new year off to a great start, and happy New Year to you guys, and to everyone listening. Hope you have a great, healthy 2023.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for coming on, Bill. And don't forget that training changes behavior.